I think we've all got that one game that plagues our mind with uncertainty, that one game that you're just not sure about, a game that just doesn't seem to entice you or causes you to look at the game's footage and think, oh, I've got to play that next. I've heard a lot of love and respect for Subnautica over the years, ever since it left early access back in 2018, and maybe it's just me, but there are certain environmental settings in games that just don't do it for me. I love playing in an open world with lush forests, or harsh snowy lands, or painfully hot deserts, and even flying off into outer space, just to name a few of my preferred gaming backdrops, but stick me in an ocean and I tend to find it pretty boring. I find that with games where I have to go deep underwater, I just find myself rushing to get back on land, and no, that's not because I suffer from thalassophobia, a fear of the big wide ocean or anything like that. I just find that the ocean in games is inexplicably boring. For example, that level in GTA 5 where you steal a submarine, the journey back in control of that stolen submarine is filled with conversation. Why? Because a long journey through an ocean is just boring, and Rockstar knew that we needed some entertainment, especially bearing in mind that there wasn't enough room for a hooker in that lonely old sub. So with Subnautica, I was expecting a similar underwater experience with mind-numbing journeys and a few survival mechanics thrown in there, but instead I drifted upon a deep sea odyssey of epic proportions. I finally persuaded myself to take the plunge into the abyss, and Jesus, what was I waiting for? Subnautica is a deep diving survival exploration game developed and published by Unknown Worlds, a perfectly suited company name for developing games like this. We take control of an unnamed protagonist in the 22nd century who is, or rather was, a crew member of a deep space vessel called the Aurora. Now, the Aurora was venturing through space on a mission to build new means of space travel for humanity, but the vessel comes crashing down on an alien planet called 4546b that's seemingly nothing but familiar ocean. Once I emerged from my life pod though, I took my first look around and thought, this is just your typical ocean scene right here. But once I'd extinguished my life pod's fire and poked my head under the water to see some massive seal with a giant boulder for a tail that has yellow gaseous blobs on it, I said, you can fuck right off. I hopped back into my life pod and thought, I'll just wait for all of this just to blow over. But this is a true survival game, so I was soon prompted with my built-in AI to seek fluids and food, meaning I had no choice but to do more than just put my head underwater. I had to overcome my newly developed thalassophobia, man up and dive into this alien ocean balls deep and go exploring for new methods of survival. Throughout Subnautica, we're tasked with the typical survival necessities like keeping yourself well nourished and topped up with fluids, and we're even blessed with cat-like reflexes from the get-go as well, because we can just grab any fish we want with our bare hands and take it back to the life pod's fabricator for cooking or processing into water. Pretty handy. This fabricator is your workstation to craft all of your items, and for the first half of the game, or even longer if you're going in blind, your life pod and the fabricator within will be your home away from home. Eventually you'll unlock the Habitat Builder blueprint, which does exactly what it says on the tin, unlocking the ability to build yourself a base away from the life pod. With the base building and all the deep diving vehicles unlocked, you're effectively granted the ability to explore until your heart's content. Not that my heart would ever actually consent to this, because some of these creatures in the bowels of this planet would make even David Attenborough want to quit his job.
What the fucking hell is that? Fuck this. I quit.
That leads me onto the horror aspect of the game, and some players genuinely believe this is a real survival horror. Now personally, I disagree, and even though I did find myself shitting in my wetsuit at the sight of the unknown in the early stages, the effect eventually wears off, sort of inevitably. The creatures are very territorial, and most will actually leave you alone if you leave them alone. There's still huge fear-inducing moments throughout, and that'll likely depend on your personal phobias, like venturing into these tight and winding crevices, turning left then right then left then right before receiving an AI warning of 30 seconds of oxygen remaining, turning around and saying, oh shit, how do I get out of here? That to me is pure claustrophobic terror, and at times it makes the likes of Rapture in BioShock feel like Disneyland in comparison. Thankfully though, in these situations there is a tool that you can unlock called the Pathfinder, which will act like a breadcrumb trail, helping you navigate your way out of these crevices. Subnautica certainly has moments of fear and terror, but I do think there's a subtle difference between these feelings and an actual horror story, where the scares are much more purposeful and written into the script. With Subnautica, the fear is not quite written into the script though, it feels much more circumstantial, and I think that's actually where the beauty of this game lies, in not being your typical survival game. Alongside the grind that somehow doesn't feel like a grind, and the fear that isn't quite horror, both of which already set Subnautica apart from most other survival games, there's an intriguing and engrossing storyline to enjoy. For me, it's up there as one of the best stories I've played in a survival game. It's another aspect of Subnautica that really elevates it to the top of the survival game genre and goes toe to toe with my personal favourite survival game story, The Forest. There's certainly some familiar earthly sights once you take your first submersion into this ocean, and the first thing that struck me was the incredible beauty of this unnerving underwater world. The vibrant colours of all the various life forms and aquatic flowers were a sight to behold. The recent update patch 2.0 attempts to blend Subnautica Below Zero with its predecessor, adding new base building items, over 800 bug fixes, new accessibility options, and the one I was most interested in was performance improvements. Even with my limited experience playing before the patch, watching my mate play or watching a few videos online, playing myself now, I can still pretty confidently say that the texture popping is pretty severe still. But with that being said, there's still genuine immersion to be found in Subnautica, because eventually I was looking past the pop-in with the game evoking such a truly unique survival experience. While Subnautica still maintains a familiar playstyle to most survival games, there's elements to the game that are so refreshing and fulfilling that I'm going to struggle to do them justice when describing them. This is a survival game, so there is a certain degree of grind and farming that's likely to be second nature to most survival game lovers, but if you hate that aspect of survival games, I still think there's something here for you regardless. The ever-expanding list of craftable tools and items is constantly growing at such a good pace that I rarely felt like I actually was grinding. Just as I was starting to think that one item or piece of equipment I'm working towards is going to be the holy grail of the game, that literal game changer, there were 3 other items introduced to me that I needed to go and gather the necessary items for crafting. Now don't get me wrong, there's obviously an end to the list of craftable items, but they're all unlocked so organically and naturally to the flow of the game. The speed in which the tools at my disposal all unlocked was amazingly well paced without rushing me. Increasing your oxygen tank capacity to dive deeper and deeper, a floating oxygen pump that you can attach pipes to that act like a midway checkpoint so you don't have to return to the surface for air, and eventually vehicles like a sea moth, cyclops, and even something that's called a bloody prawn suit. These can all be upgraded to help you handle the eardrum bursting pressures of the eerie foreign depths, helping you explore into darker and deeper territories to find more materials and uncover blueprints that'll increase your brilliantly and well orchestrated methods of survival. The game does nothing to hold your hand or even offer you some armbands, but somehow I never felt lost. There's no map and very few waypoints to lead the way, in your life pod and the other potential survivors' life pods that can be found after repairing your radio are all marked on the player's HUD. Any waypoints you want to make yourself require the crafting of a beacon to place in a point of the world that you want to return to. The life pods have vital information stored on PDAs within them, and there's the obvious landmark of the Aurora crash site as well as your life pod that'll constantly act as a point of reference, and I imagine without those it'd be near impossible to continuously navigating this world. So in truth, it's hats off to the developers for somehow making me feel like Jacques Cousteau, with me being regularly rewarded for my curiosity without being told build this first or head here to find this essential item. I'm not sure why it took me so long to dive into Subnautica, but I'm so glad I eventually did, and combining everything I've mentioned with the still present optimization issue with texture popping here and there, that does knock it down a touch, and my personal feelings towards the deep ocean setting, Subnautica is still one of the best survival games out there today. If you've enjoyed the review, drop it a like, and anyone who's able to support the channel, helping me continue to make these videos, I have dropped a Patreon link in the description. I do hate doing this sort of thing, to be honest, it makes me cringe, but any support at all would make a massive difference to the channel. It really would be a big help. Most importantly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Subnautica, and I'll see you in the next one.